Hello there! Welcome back to my workshop. Today we're going to be looking at a +3 board that I bought from eBay. It looked particularly crusty, so I thought it would be a good one to get. Plus I do have a keyboard for it, so that's a good bonus. We're going to try and get this working and see what my options are for getting some programs loading onto it so that we can do more testing. So let's go! This is what I brought. It's an Amstrad Spectrum +3 issue 2 board, and it was sold on its own, no leads, no power, untested, you know the story. Doesn't look too bad on the top, but if we flip it over, the back of the board looks pretty nasty. A couple of things that stick out straight away is that it's missing the top for the ribbon cable for that. This corner, but I think they're all ground on the top, and that's not too bad. So my first step is the usual, and we're going to check to make sure that it's safe to plug it in. When I first got this, I didn't have a power lead and I don't have a video lead. So they're two things that we need to address. As a bonus, if you remember, I had this keyboard from the Pico video, and this does work with this board. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to buy it, just because I knew that I had the keyboard to go with it. We do have the Diagnostic card, but unfortunately this card does not support the +2A and the +3 boards. It only works on the Sinclair boards, not the Amstrad boards. So this is actually useless in this case. So let's quickly get set up and we'll do some basic tests to make sure that there is no shorts on this board before I cobble together a power lead and a video lead so that we can see what it's doing. So this is the incoming power, and it is a DIN socket. But thankfully there is a port just here that provides power to the floppy drive, and there's also a point just here. So we could quickly do a continuity. So 1 point on ground, 1 point on 5 volt. We have nothing. So there's definitely no short to 5 volt. And we can do the same thing to the floppy drive point. So nothing on that one. Nothing on that one. So I am reasonably confident that we can turn this on without things going bang. So I'm going to be using my bench power supply. I ordered a DIN lead. This is the correct one for the power supply. And I just wired it up with ground on the black wire. 5 volt is red and 12 volt is yellow. We do need 5 volt and 12 volt to power this board because the display uses 12 volt on this chip. So we do have to have both. My power supply only outputs a single voltage. What I've bodged together is this DIN lead. 5 volt goes in, and then we have a booster. So this will output 12 volts from 5 volts. So it is a bit of a bodge, but it will work. So I'm just quickly going to test this just to see how many milliamps that it draws, and check that it's safe before we go any further. And we are set to 5 volts on our power supply. So if I turn that on, we are drawing 500 milliamps. So it's definitely trying to do something. Let's turn that off. The next thing that I tried to do was to get composite out of this so that we can capture it. So as I was reading, I found that we need to make a little circuit that fixes a few things, and that didn't work. So I wasn't sure if this was the problem or if this was just doing nothing. So I ended up ordering an RGB lead, and like an idiot I ordered the RGB lead for the +2, not the +2A or the +3. So as you'll see here, this is what's left of the connections for the +2 SCART, and using the instructions that you'll see on the screen, I wired up another SCART lead so that this has got the correct connections. The +3 outputs an analog RGB, whilst the +2, the Sinclair one, has brightness levels, so it doesn't work with this lead. It's wired different. You get an awful buzzing sound because one of the sync leads is wired up to go to audio in the SCART lead. So I bodged this to work with the +3. I'm going to get this quickly set up and we'll plug it in and we'll see what we get on our screen. So I'm going to turn on the power to the power supply. And this is what we're getting. So the border is changing colour and we have garbage on the screen. But that does mean that it's running. It's actually trying to do something. So I'm not sure why I couldn't get the composite output. So on these boards, there's one part which is fairly common fault, which is this chip. And if I touch it, you can see that I'm able to affect the output on the screen. So I'm fairly confident that we need to reflow the pins on that. And it's incredibly dirty. So I think reflow the pins on that and then give it a good clean will be a big help. I do have the diagnostic card. I have changed it to be 128 compatible. Let's just try it. It does say that it doesn't support it. You notice that we don't get any lights changing on the diode card, and we're getting nothing working on the screen. So this is definitely not good for Amstrad based spectrums. But what I did do, I burnt a ROM, and it is the same ROM that's on the card, and we can replace this ROM with the diagnostic ROM so we can see if it's doing something. These are 27256 chips, so it's very easy for me to burn a new ROM. So let's try this. So you'll note that we did get the beeps that the diagnostic makes when it starts up. Then we get the code, so we know that the code is running. But as you can see on the screen, we've just got red lines and it doesn't really do anything else. So that's pretty good. It's running code is a good sign. Because it's running code, we should have a working Z80 and it is reading the ROM. So quite a lot of the system is actually running. And it could just be that the ULA part, the display, is disconnected in some way. So I'm going to disconnect all of this. We'll flip it over. We'll try reflowing the pins on this chip, see what changes that makes, and then we'll give it a good clean. So let's reflow the gate array, and I'm using Chip Quick PGA rework flux. I have very high quality solder and a very tiny small tip on my JBC clone. The basic idea is that we are looking for legs that are not soldered to the board. We're looking for anything that looks wonky or twisted, and we're just going to reflow all the solder and then check that the legs are actually making contact and are not moving about. One side of this chip is particularly bad and it looks like it's shifted over to one side. I did spend some time on it, but I didn't spend enough time, which will bite me in the backside later on. But anyway, we just work our way around, checking every leg, and then once we've done that, we use the tweezers and give it a solid test, as Stez would say. Be very careful on some of these because some of the traces on the board have actually lifted up. So we just have to be gentle, and thankfully I do have that very nice microscope, which makes all of this so much easier. Once we've done all the rework, then I'll just clean it up with some IPA and we can give it a good test. So we have reflowed our chip and I've plugged it back in again. Let's try this and see what happens. We have text on the screen. That's excellent. So far so good. Let's put the original ROM back in. Okay, original ROM back in. And we have got an Amstrad screen. Excellent. So next job is giving the board a clean, and we definitely need to look at cleaning this keyboard connector so that we can do more testing. But that's awesome. That's the +3 board is actually working, pending more diagnostics. Excellent. Right, let's just quickly clean up this keyboard connector. As you can see, it's quite crusty inside. I don't have high hopes for it. So first, I'm going to clean it up with some vinegar, and then we'll clean that up with IPA. So we'll just give that a spritz with the vinegar, and then we'll let that soak. I've been buying, recently I've bought this IPA, which is in a spray bottle. So before, I was using these little bottles that I got from Sainsbury's, and they're okay, but the IPA seems to destroy the spray pumps in them. And then I also brought these bottles from CPC for things like deoxit and lube, which have got like a needle on the end, and these have been really good as well. Right, that's soaked in a bit. Something about. Clean that off. Yeah, we're getting some shine on there. I think it would be enough to get it working. So we just need to, and you can see what's coming out of it. And I will show that I did try to clean one side now, and it should clean up okay. So I am happy. So I'll let that soak, and then I will thoroughly dry it off, and we can try connecting up the keyboard. We've got the screen connected up, diagnostic ROM is in. So we want 4. Yes, keyboard is working. So now we can do the 1 to 8K tests. Okay, 128K of RAM tests passed. Testing complete. So we could do a keyboard test. So every key is making a sound, but we're only testing with a 48K layout. New. Okay, I'm very happy. The keyboard is working. All of the tests are working. We can either clean up the bottom of the board now and look at fixing the port for the floppy drive, and then finding a floppy drive or a Gotek, and then clean it afterwards.
He chose poorly.
Then we need to think about a case that it's going to go in. So a few things to think about. But at least stage 1 is good, and we have a working board. I've plugged the normal ROM back in, so we have the original ROM, and if we boot up pressing the brake key, we get this screen. So we are seeing all the colours, and we are getting the sound, which is good. It's been a couple of weeks, Christmas break and all that lot, and I've been messing about with the Plus 3. Bought a Gotek, and I've been trying to get the Gotek working. So there are lots of guides on the internet showing you how to connect up a Gotek, and if you have an adapter you can connect it up to this internal port, or you can make a lead and connect it up to the edge connector that's on the back. I have tried both and can't seem to get it working. I did try a normal floppy drive as well, and they get a similar result. So if we just quickly do a cat, and I'm connected up to the B drive at this time, so B colon. So it says to put the disk in. And it basically does nothing. It just sits there. You can see there that it's trying to do something. It's attempting to talk to the Gotek, but it just does nothing. And we've got an error on our screen, seek, fail, retry or cancel. If I retry, again you can see that the Gotek really doesn't do anything. It's having a go, so something is talking to the Gotek, but just doesn't read any data. And I've flashed the firmware on there. I'll make sure it's got the latest firmware. I've added on an LCD and the rotary encoder so I can see what it's doing. The version of firmware that came with Gotek was for a musical keyboard, so it was very old, and I programmed it, I've updated it, and it's got the latest one on there now. I also looked through lots of information, and somebody sent me a file which is from their emulator which works on their Gotek. So this is a disk that was made in Fuse, and he said it 100% works on his. So I'm just going to do the same command again. Cat B colon. So again you can see that it's trying. Some things are changing, but the Plus 3 just basically sits there. So like I said, there's lots of information about connecting this up, and you can do it internally or externally. Internally is drive A, externally is drive B. Whoa, hang on a minute. Let's just take a step back. So we could watch me mess about with an oscilloscope, probing points on the floppy drive, on the Gotek, comparing it to what we see on the circuit diagram, manually testing, trying to figure out what's going on. Or, and hear me out now, or we could do what we hinted at doing all along. We could do the basics, which is clean up all that gunk off the back of the board. Inspecting all of the solder and looking for damage, bad joints on the chips around the floppy circuit. We could replace that damaged connector and fit a new ribbon cable so that it's back to a stock configuration. We could buy an actual internal Gotek adapter PCB so that we know that it's working properly. And then we could remove the remaining chips and run them through the retro chip tester. It just so turns out that all of the chips that I remove actually work okay, and we can put them back in the board with the sockets after looking underneath the chips again for any signs of damage. So that's what I did do in the end. I also changed the way that I was running the power. So instead of taking 5 volt and boosting it up, I'm taking 12 volt and dropping it down. So the 12 volt for the board comes directly from the power supply, and then the 5 volt is using a buck converter. The system just seems to work a lot better. As soon as I changed the way the power supply works, I no longer had to hit reset. It would automatically try to run the boot command at the start. The very last thing that I should have done is re-inspected my work on the gate array. I didn't do a very good job. So as we'll see on the microscope, There was that row of pins that was basically pushed over to one side, and they weren't making very good contact. A lot of the traces have been lifted up underneath those legs, and they were just crooked. And I even had a couple that were shorted together. I don't know if these are related to the floppy disk, but as you'll see, I've just gone through each one. I've desoldered the legs, I lift the legs up so that I can straighten everything out, and then I go over it again and resolder everything, and then I work my way around all of the legs on the gate array, and I double check that everything is solid and soldered and straight, so that there is no chance of anything touching anything else. That was the final thing that I did.
One eternity later.
After so much messing about, misdirection, and not doing the basics, here we are. We have the +3 connected up with the keyboard and the Gotek. I did print a mount for the Gotek, so the screen is in there, but my rotary encoder is the wrong one. It doesn't stay in there, but it'll be okay. I do have lots of images on the key now, so we can give those a try. First of all, let's turn this on. And I'm happy to report that it still works. So there we have a 720K blank image. If we go to +3 basic, we do a cat. And after all of that, we finally have the Gotek working. That was so much work. And if I'd have just done the basics in the beginning, I could have done this so much sooner. So we just have a blank disk. If we change the blank disk, let's do reset. So this should have some utilities on. So yeah, that's okay. I couldn't get Robocop to work, but I'm guessing that's something to do with the disk image. So if we go to the loader, it just does that. I don't know what's going on with that. But then I did find a very nice collection of images. Some of them have loaders, some of them don't. This was on a Spanish website. And you can see that it's loading from the disk. I've no idea what games are on it. That will be something that I can do at a later date. So there we go. That's a month of messing about with this board, and I would have saved myself 2 weeks of messing about with the Gotek, pestering the nice people on Twitter, asking them how theirs is set up. If I'd have just cleaned the back of the board first, done the basics, checked for bad solder, checked the chips, checked all the vias, make sure none of those were bad, made the new lead rather than trying to bodge stuff up, you see my point? I just wasted so much time. We could have been up and running ages ago. Well, it's done now anyway. So it's working. There's a few bits left to test. But the next part really is, what do I put it in? I haven't really been able to find like an empty +3. So could it be that I have to design and 3D print something? But it's a big old board. It's going to take quite a while to run through the prototypes. I have some ideas. But yeah, that's basically another video. I think this one has gone on far long enough. So if you're still with me at the end after all of this, thank you so much for watching. And thank you for voting in the poll. Working on the Amstrad, I've now got some of the documentation that I need to carry on working on that. It's looking like it's going to be the keyboard that's going to be the main problem. I'm working on the Mega Drives, making progress on those. Now I've got the cap kits, hopefully that's going to help. And I'm also still working on the 3D printer. I've been doing lots of speed testing. Hopefully you've seen that on Twitter as well. So I can do you a really good demonstration of what it's capable of. So thank you for watching. keep a lookout for the next part of the +3 board. And I'll see you soon. Bye.